Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time it is another underrated, maybe undervalued episode in the series. I believe it is number 4. So let's start off with this one right here. Echo of Future Past. Is this a valuable book? No. This is not a valuable book by any stretch of the means. I don't think it should be ridiculously overvalued or anything like that, but I do think it's a little underrated. The character Bucky O'Hare, I remember in the early 90s, and even a little bit after that, the character was, getting some traction. Even had his own video game. And, it's got some great artwork in this book by Neil Adams. So I do think that this is a little bit underrated. Echo of Future Past 1. Here we have Marvel Team Up number 141. Whenever it comes to the black costume, 2 books come to mind. And rightfully so, too. Amazing Spider-Man, 242? And Secret Wars 8. It's always a debate which one of those was the first appearances. But this was also part of that introduction to the black costume family of books. And I think that this one was the probably the least popular of the 3. And maybe rightfully so. But I still feel that it is maybe a little undervalued because it did debut around the time when the black costume first showed up. So that's why I put it in this video. Here we have one. Hellboy number 1. This was his first miniseries. This was also the beginning. I think it's a 4-parter, right? I don't have all 4. I have the first 2. This is part 1. Number 1, excuse me. I do think it's a little underrated because the first original Hellboy movie took a lot of its material from this book and the rest of this miniseries. And it also introduced several characters. I believe it's the first appearance of Liz Sherman. It might be the first appearance of Abe Sapien. I'm not entirely sure. But regardless of that, it's the first time Hellboy has his own series. So I think it is a little underrated because there were many Hellboy series that came out after this. Here's another one. X-Men book, X-Men 109, first appearance of Weapon Alpha, sometimes called Vindicator. It's not necessarily a book you're going to find in a dollar bin, right? It's a book that's, has a little bit of meat to it when it comes to price, but I still think it doesn't get a lot of traction as it should because it still ties in a little bit with Wolverine's origin, which I think was pretty cool back then. Back then when they first started the new X-Men, they were trying to piece together the origins, and here you have a little bit of Wolverine coming out when it comes to his origin. And his origin remained a mystery for many, many years. But this is one of the first issues where you start seeing more of his origin. And I think for that, it's, has to do with a major character, Wolverine. That's why it's a little, maybe, underrated. Now, here's one of my personal favorites. X-Men 62. I don't think it's necessarily undervalued. I don't think this is a book that should be, hundreds of dollars. I mean, of course, when you get to those 9.6s, 9.8s, it's a different story for a lot of books, right? Not just for Silver Age. But I've said it before in another video. This is the first time you see Magneto without his helmet. The first time you actually see his face, his full face, his full head. And I think that's why it's a little underrated. For up until this point, and this series ended a few issues later before it would be rebooted 5 years after. But for all that time, you never saw Magneto without his helmet. Every time you saw him, he was always wearing the helmet, wearing the costume. But it was the first time in this book where you actually saw him without his helmet. I think that's just so fascinating and so cool. And that's why I think it's a little underrated. World's Finest. What number? I always forget what number this is. This is 111. Not really talked about that much. It is the first appearance of the Clock King. I think it's the first appearance of the second Clock King. I think the very, very, very first Clock King showed up in Star Spangled. I think number 70, way back when. But it was this Clock King that made his first appearance that would later be on the 66 series. For a Batman villain, he doesn't really get talked about that much. He's obviously not in the same league with the major Batman villains like the Penguin, the Joker, Riddler, and all that. But still a pretty cool Batman villain that made his Silver Age debut. Not really talked about, and maybe just a little underrated. Maybe even a little undervalued, too. This one I think is a little undervalued. Journey into Mystery 114. I love red covers, and I just love this cover. And I'm not saying that the Absorbing Man is such a great character. I just can't understand why this book is so undervalued. I'm not saying it like that. I'm just saying that I do think the character does have some significance. It's an early appearance in an early journey into mystery before Thor became the mighty Thor in the previous series, and sometimes you could still get this book in a mid-grade for a good price. So I do maybe think it's a little underappreciated, maybe a little undervalued, but such a great cover. Such a great cover. Everybody wants the issue that comes before this one, and rightfully so. But I don't, I think this is a little underappreciated, underrated. Yes, it is the second appearance of Morbius. Okay, whatever. Everyone wants his first appearance. I get that. But you get his origin in this book, and you get the really cool story of Spider-Man and the Lizard teaming up to try to defeat Morbius. It was a really good story. And, I like second appearances. Sometimes first appearances are just so outrageously priced. You want to get the first appearance of the XMen in X-Men #1. Then you try getting their second appearance at X-Men #2. Big difference, right? Well, this is one of them that I think is much cheaper than the first appearance and still worth having. A few more here. I think this one doesn't really get a lot of love. It's a classic story and a classic cover, I think. Fantastic 451. It's first appearance of the Negative Zone, but I just don't think that it's as valuable as maybe it should be. I still think that the Negative Zone plays a very important part in the Marvel Universe, especially with the Fantastic Four. And I think that sometimes that is, the fact that it made its debut in this book, I think it's sometimes shuffled off to the side and forgotten about. Here's another one. The first appearance is crazy. It's out of reach for a lot of people. Obviously, the second appearance and the third appearance too. But I think this is a good one to have. It's a little maybe undervalued, and I think a little underrated for sure. Shazam #1, first modern appearance of Captain Marvel or Shazam. This is still a book you could get fairly cheap, despite the fact that the Shazam movie had come out and I think did really well. So this looks to be a future for Shazam in the DC universe, but it's still a very affordable book at a high grade. And the last one, I don't know, maybe some people might disagree with me on this one, but I think it's a little undervalued. I mean, although it can go for a decent price. Swamp Thing #1. People say, well, wait a minute, that's an expensive book. Yeah, in high grade it can be pretty expensive, but it's nothing compared to House of Secrets '92. There was a time, I don't know about it right now. I know that with this TV series Swamp Thing, it was shelved. I don't know how much that book is going for now. Sure, it's pretty expensive, but the next best thing would be Swamp Thing #1. It's fairly affordable, so maybe it is a little undervalued. And maybe even a little underrated. Well, that's part 4 of this series. I hope you enjoyed it. I should have a few more of these coming out over the months, so I would hope that you would watch. Stay tuned. And until then, take care.